The words echo through the Massachusetts morning like a demonic prayer, chanted by your own neighbors, your own friends, people who borrowed sugar from you just last week. But now their faces are twisted with a righteous fury that makes them unrecognizable, inhuman, absolutely terrifying. Welcome to Salem 1692. It's about to get ugly. The rope creaks in the Massachusetts morning like a broken hymn, swaying above faces you recognize but no longer understand. Your neighbors, your friends, people who shared communion bread with you last Sunday, but now their eyes burn with something that has nothing to do with Christianity and everything to do with the most terrifying force in human history, collective certainty armed with righteous fury. The smoke rising from the pyre doesn't smell like wood. It smells like fear, like flesh, like the complete collapse of everything you thought you knew about human decency. And underneath it all is another smell, the acrid stench of mass hysteria, thick and choking like breathing liquid madness. This is your execution waiting to happen. You've just walked into Salem Village, Massachusetts, summer of 1692, and I'm about to prove why you wouldn't survive your first accusation. Not because you lack courage, but because you're carrying the fatal burden of believing innocence is a defense, that truth matters more than consensus, and that reasonable people can be reasoned with. Margaret Barclay thought she was safe. She was wrong. Bridget Bishop thought her innocence would protect her. It didn't. And you're about to discover why the Salem Witch Trials weren't just about witchcraft. They were about the most terrifying thing in human history. What happens when an entire community goes collectively insane? By the end of this video, you'll understand the 3 psychological traps that killed 20 innocent people, and why your modern conscience is more dangerous than any imaginary witch ever was. But first, if you think you could navigate Salem's madness, hit that subscribe button and comment "innocent" below. Trust me, after the next 16 minutes, you'll understand why innocence was the most dangerous thing you could be. Welcome to the deadliest social contagion ever recorded. I'm about to take you inside America's deadliest religious experiment, a community that weaponized faith, legalized murder, and transformed courtrooms into altars where innocent blood was spilled in God's name. And here's what's going to horrify you most. Your death wouldn't be random persecution. It would be the mathematically predictable result of carrying modern assumptions about human decency into a world that had confused murder with moral purification. The taste of madness meets mathematical certainty. The air in Salem tastes like iron and ash, not the metallic tang of blood, but something worse. The flavor of paranoia made manifest, of fear so intense it becomes a physical presence you can taste on your tongue. Every breath carries the essence of a community eating itself alive from the inside out. You've just stepped off the cart from Boston, carrying letters of introduction and assumptions about human decency that will mark you for death within hours. The first thing that hits you isn't what you see, it's what you don't hear. No children laughing, no women gossiping, no men arguing politics. Just oppressive silence of a community holding its breath, waiting for the next accusation to drop like an executioner's axe. This is fundamentally, cosmically wrong, like stepping into a world where the basic laws of human behavior have been suspended and replaced with something from a nightmare. Because in Salem 1692, attention is death. Trap 1. The architecture of accusation. Being an outsider is a death sentence. Salem Village in 1692 tastes like iron and desperation, not blood, but something worse. The metallic flavor of paranoia made manifest, of fear so concentrated it coats your tongue with every breath. This is civilization eating itself alive from the inside out. The buildings themselves seem to lean in, listening, waiting for you to say the wrong thing. Salem Village in 1692 isn't just a place. It's a trap designed by paranoia and built from the wood of gallows trees. Every window is an eye. Every door is a mouth ready to whisper accusations. You're walking past Bridget Bishop's tavern, and you can feel the weight of judgmental stares from behind shuttered windows. Bridget Bishop, the first to hang, the first to die for the crime of being different. Her tavern was too successful, her clothing too colourful, her personality too bold for a community that had decided conformity was survival. Your fatal mistake begins the moment you open your mouth to ask directions. Your speech patterns, vocabulary, casual references to life outside Salem. Every word marks you as an outsider. In a community where conformity equals survival, being different equals being suspect. Here's the terrifying mathematics. In Salem Village during 1692, approximately 30% of the adult population was either accused of witchcraft, made accusations against others, or served as witnesses in trials. This wasn't a legal system processing crimes. It was a community systematically consuming itself. But here's what makes Salem uniquely terrifying. The accusations didn't follow any logical pattern. Bridget Bishop was accused because she was unconventional. Sarah Good was accused because she was poor and unpleasant. Rebecca Nurse was accused despite being the most respected woman in the village. Martha Corey was accused for expressing skepticism about the accusations themselves. Salem operates on an accusation economy where currency is suspicion and market value is determined by how useful your death would be to community purification. Those who've survived accusations carry social bankruptcy, forever suspect and charged premium prices. Those who've made successful accusations that led to executions enjoy preferred status proportional to neighbors they've helped murder. The architecture of accusation was built on a simple principle: anyone could be next. Wealth wouldn't protect you. Several accusers targeted property owners whose land they wanted. Poverty wouldn't save you. The destitute were easy targets. Piety was no defense. Some of the most devout were accused of secret devil worship. Skepticism was fatal. Questioning the trials was proof of witchcraft. The tavern keeper quotes you prices 3 times higher than the previous customer. A stern woman whose accusation sent 2 families to the gallows last month. That's not greed. That's sound business practice. Why extend credit to someone who might not survive the week? Your employment prospects follow the same logic. A blacksmith who can shoe horses is valuable. A blacksmith who can identify supernatural manifestations in neighbors is indispensable. A school teacher who can read is useful. One who can recognize demonic possession in students is a community treasure. You're beginning to understand that this isn't about witchcraft at all. It's about a community that has found the perfect excuse to destroy anyone they don't like, anyone they envy, anyone who threatens their vision of perfect social order. The witch trials are just the mechanism. The real disease is much deeper. And that's just how your outsider status dooms you. The second trap is even more insidious. The chemistry of collective insanity, Margaret Barclay's lesson. The madness has a smell, and it's seeping into everything. Not the clean smell of individual mental illness, but something far more toxic. The stench of group psychosis, of an entire community's reality becoming completely detached from actual reality. You're breathing it in with every breath, and you can feel it changing you. Margaret Barclay knew this smell. In Irvine, Scotland, 1618, she watched as her community turned against her with the same inexplicable fury you're witnessing now. Margaret was accused of using witchcraft to sink a ship that was actually destroyed by a perfectly natural storm. But logic has no power against mass hysteria. Margaret confessed under torture, then recanted, then confessed again. She named others as witches to make her own pain stop. Those others named still more. The accusation spread like a plague, infecting everyone it touched, creating a network of guilt and terror that consumed dozens of lives before burning itself out. But here's the truly horrifying part. Margaret Barclay was real. Her suffering was real. Her death was real, and the people who killed her were ordinary citizens, neighbors, friends, people who went to church, raised children, lived normal lives right up until the moment they became monsters. You're tasting that same transformation now in Salem. The metallic flavor of human nature revealing its darkest possibilities, the acrid burn of moral certainty twisted into moral blindness. Every person you see is capable of becoming either victim or executioner, sometimes both on the same day. The taste is getting stronger because you're beginning to realize something terrible. You're not just witnessing this madness, you're becoming part of it. Because in Salem, there are no neutral parties. Silence is complicity, doubt is heresy, and the only way to prove your innocence is to accuse someone else. Trap. 2. Expecting evidence instead of spectral justice. 43 citizens have gathered to hear testimony against Martha Corey, whose crime was suggesting the afflicted girls might be mistaken. The evidence is spectacular in its impossibility. She allegedly sent her spectre to torment children while her physical body sat in church, reciting prayers with perfect composure. By any rational standard, this case would be dismissed immediately. Spectral evidence, testimony about dreams and visions, would be laughed out of any legitimate court. But Salem created a legal system where impossible evidence is more convincing than physical proof, where children's fantasies carry more weight than adult testimony. No defense attorney present. They're obstacles to divine justice. No presumption of innocence. Being accused is evidence of guilt. No appeals process. Community decisions are final as the grave. The Puritans haven't abandoned legal procedure, they've perfected it into an instrument of legalized murder. The courtroom smells like fear and feels like a cathedral of madness. You're watching the examination of another accused witch, and the ritual is always the same. The afflicted girls convulse and scream at precisely the right moments. The judges ask leading questions designed to elicit confessions. The accused faces an impossible choice: confess to lies and live in shame, or maintain innocence and die with dignity. But here's the twist that reveals the true evil of Salem. Confession saves your life but dooms others. Because confessing witches must name their co-conspirators. And those names become new accusations, and those accusations become new trials, and the machine of destruction feeds on itself like a cancer that grows by consuming healthy tissue. Here's where your civilized instincts become death sentences. Your belief in due process marks you as someone who values legal technicalities over spiritual truth. Your insistence on physical evidence suggests you're blind to supernatural realities. Your discomfort with condemning people based on dreams indicates dangerous skepticism about God's revelation. When they ask for community input, you can't help yourself. You stand up and speak about corroborating evidence, the dangers of accepting testimony from disturbed children, the need for cooling off periods. The meeting house listens with polite attention while mentally composing your death warrant. The vote is swift. 37 for immediate trial, 4 for further investigation, 2 abstentions. The abstainers are noted for future attention. Martha Corey's fate is sealed not by evidence of guilt, but by community consensus that her guilt serves necessary purposes. What would horrify you most isn't the injustice, it's the efficiency. Communities with active witch trials removed troublesome members faster than any conventional legal system. Swift certainty proved more socially useful than elaborate pursuit of actual truth. The taste is overwhelming now, the flavor of ritual murder, of ceremony and formality wrapped around the most primitive human savagery. They're not just killing people, they're sanctifying the killing, making it holy, turning murder into a religious observance that brings the community together in shared bloodlust. The third trap reveals the deadliest virtue you possess. The economics of envy meets the contagion of accusation. The accusations are spreading like plague, jumping from person to person with the inexorable logic of epidemic disease. But this isn't a natural contagion. It's something worse. It's a social virus that attacks the immune system of rational thought, leaving entire communities defenseless against their own worst impulses. Money tastes different in Salem, like copper pennies dipped in poison. Because the witch trials aren't just about supernatural fears. They're about the most natural human emotion, envy. And envy, you're discovering, is far more deadly than any imaginary devil. You're looking at the property records, and a pattern emerges that has nothing to do with witchcraft and everything to do with real estate. Many of the accused happen to own valuable land. Many of the accusers happen to covet that land. When witches are hanged, their property is forfeit. When property is forfeit, it can be bought cheaply by those who know how to position themselves advantageously. Margaret Barclay owned a prosperous bakery. Bridget Bishop ran a successful tavern. Giles Corey possessed 80 acres of prime farmland. Coincidence? In a world where coincidences are evidence of supernatural intervention, perhaps. But you're beginning to see the very earthly logic beneath the heavenly hysteria. You're watching it happen in real time. One girl screams that she sees a witch tormenting her. Other girls begin seeing the same witch. Adults who should know better start seeing things too. The hallucination becomes collective, shared, more real than reality, because it's validated by group consensus. But what makes the Salem contagion unique is its systematic nature. These aren't random accusations driven by spontaneous hysteria. They're strategic, targeted, designed to achieve specific social and economic outcomes. The madness has method, the chaos has purpose, and that makes it infinitely more terrifying than simple insanity. The taste is changing again, becoming more complex and horrible. Now it's not just iron and ash. It's the flavor of human nature stripped of its protective illusions, revealed in all its capacity for evil. You're tasting what people really are when the social constraints are removed, when moral authority becomes moral license, when the community gives them permission to be monsters. You realize that you're not just witnessing a historical atrocity, you're watching a demonstration of how quickly civilization can collapse when people decide that their fears are more important than their neighbors' lives. Trap 3. Treating truth like a defense instead of a death sentence. You're witnessing something that looks like legal proceedings, but functions like ritualized warfare. Accusations follow patterns more complex than diplomatic protocols. This isn't random persecution, it's formalized social combat, refined through centuries of religious persecution. The flavor of lies has its own signature, bitter, clinging, coating your mouth like ash from a funeral pyre. And in Salem, lies are the only currency that matters. Not money, not goods, not even truth. Just the ability to tell the right lie to the right people at the right moment. You're watching Abigail Williams, one of the original accusers, and you can see madness and calculation warring behind her eyes. Is she genuinely experiencing supernatural visions, or is she a teenage girl who's discovered that accusations give her power over adults? The terrifying answer is, it doesn't matter. Ann Putnam Jr. accused Rebecca Nurse of sending her spectre to torment her during prayer. Not dramatically, but with precision of someone who understands words have consequences measured in heartbeats. Rebecca's response was measured, acknowledging the girl's suffering while gently questioning whether the source might be natural rather than supernatural. You see an old woman defending herself against ridiculous charges and assume reason could prevail. Catastrophically wrong. Rebecca isn't defending herself. She's participating in sacred drama that can only end in her death or her accusers. Every word follows patterns established through generations of persecution, refined into deadly perfection. Meet Tituba, originally from Barbados, enslaved in Samuel Parris's household, arguably the most brilliant strategic mind in Salem's crisis. When accused of teaching witchcraft, she faced the impossible choice: maintain innocence and die, or confess to lies and navigate complex aftermath. Tituba chose a third option that revealed sophisticated understanding of Puritan psychology. She confessed enthusiastically, providing detailed descriptions of devil's sabbaths, naming other witches, describing supernatural experiences that fed community appetite for spectacular evil. But her confessions were strategically crafted to make herself useful rather than disposable. This wasn't fraud, it was survival strategy refined to art. Where truth could get you killed, fiction became life-saving skill. Where innocence was irrelevant, usefulness was everything. Because the community has decided that children's fantasies are more reliable than adult testimony, that invisible evidence is more convincing than physical proof, that spectral evidence, visions and dreams, can send people to the gallows. They've created a legal system where the accusation is the conviction, where defending yourself proves your guilt, where the only path to survival is to confess to crimes that don't exist and name others who are equally innocent. Martha Corey tried to resist. She pointed out the logical inconsistencies, the lack of real evidence, the dangerous precedent being set. For her rationality, she was branded a witch and hanged. Sarah Cloyce walked out of church when the minister preached about the guilt of the accused. Her protest was taken as proof of her own guilt. Your fatal flaw is commitment to truth about your background. In a community where everyone performed carefully constructed personas, insisting on authentic self-representation marked you as either dangerously naive or concealing something so terrible, even Salem's flexible standards couldn't accommodate it. You're learning the grammar of accusation, the syntax of survival in a world where language itself has become weaponized. Every word is a potential death sentence, every silence an admission of guilt, every gesture evidence of supernatural malevolence. The taste is changing again, becoming more complex, more nauseating. Now it's not just lies, it's the flavor of truth being murdered, strangled, buried in unmarked graves where it can never rise again to challenge the comfortable certainties of madness. Now we're about to reveal the mathematical formula that sealed your fate. The mathematical certainty of your execution. As sunset approaches, Salem's shadow leadership convenes for daily briefings that would impress professional intelligence services. Information flows through networks sophisticated enough to rival modern surveillance states. Your file has been compiled with professional thoroughness, detailed reports from every conversation, analysis of every facial expression, assessment of every reaction. The consensus among shadow leadership is unanimous. You represent more liability than asset to community purification efforts, more threat than value to collective spiritual security. Communities engaged in religious warfare cannot afford individuals who question fundamental assumptions about supernatural combat. 20 innocent people died in Salem between 1692 and 1693. 20 real human beings with real families, real contributions, real dreams, cut short by neighbors who convinced themselves murder served God's purposes. Here's the brutal mathematics that would seal your fate. In Salem, maintaining integrity cost your life, while survival required complicity in murdering innocent neighbors. No clean choices existed. No moral high ground remained uncontaminated. The mathematics are simple and terrible. In Salem, the price of maintaining your integrity was death, and the price of survival was complicity in murder. There were no good choices, no clean hands, no way to navigate the crisis without becoming either victim or perpetrator. Giles Corey refused to enter a plea, knowing that a trial would lead to conviction and the forfeiture of his property. Instead, he chose to be pressed to death under heavy stones, taking 2 days to die while gasping more weight to his tormentors. His defiance saved his family's inheritance, but cost him everything else. The accusations spread with viral efficiency, jumping from household to household according to social network patterns that mapped perfectly onto existing tensions, economic rivalries, personal grudges. Martha Corey questioned the girls' reliability. Within days, they saw her spectre tormenting them during church services. Your presence accelerates the contagion because you represent everything the community decided to purge. Your questions about evidence demonstrate dangerous skepticism. Your discomfort with spectral testimony reveals blindness to supernatural realities. Your very existence becomes proof that evil continues infiltrating despite ongoing purification efforts. Within hours of arrival, children begin experiencing new afflictions, matching your presence. Your questioning tone echoes in their supernatural torments. Your facial expressions appear on spectral forms, terrorizing them during prayer. Language itself has been weaponized. Certain phrases function as incantations, summoning immediate danger. "I think the girls might be mistaken" translates to "I question divine revelation." "Perhaps we should examine evidence more carefully" becomes "I value human wisdom above spiritual truth." You're doing the math yourself now, calculating the odds of survival in a community where accusation equals conviction, where defense equals guilt, where innocence is no protection, and guilt is sometimes a life sentence. The arithmetic of survival is written in blood and tears, and the broken bodies of people who thought they were safe. The taste in your mouth has become almost unbearable. The flavor of watching human mathematics reduce people to numbers, lives to statistics, souls to entries in a ledger of death. You're witnessing the bureaucratization of evil, the systemization of cruelty, the transformation of murder into administrative procedure. But perhaps the most terrible mathematics of all is this: Salem ended not because people came to their senses, but because the accusations finally reached people who had the power to protect themselves. When the wives of prominent ministers and government officials were accused, suddenly the standards of evidence became more stringent. The machine of destruction didn't break down. It was turned off by people who realized they might become its next victims. The contagion that kills truth. Truth has a flavor when it dies, and you're tasting it now, bitter, final, like the last breath of something essential to human civilization. In Salem, truth isn't just being ignored or distorted. It's being systematically murdered and replaced with something that serves power rather than justice. You're witnessing something unprecedented, an entire community's simultaneous descent into identical delusions, shared hallucinations, collective certainty about supernatural realities existing nowhere except their shared imagination. Mass hysteria wasn't causing Salem's crisis. It was providing convenient cover for systematic elimination of community members whose continued existence threatened others' interests, ambitions, or psychological comfort. The evidence that would clear the accused is dismissed as irrelevant. Witnesses who testify to good character are suspected of witchcraft themselves. Physical impossibilities are accepted as spiritual realities. The entire epistemological foundation of human knowledge, the idea that we can distinguish between real and imaginary, between true and false, is being destroyed. You watch respected community members perjure themselves with apparent sincerity, genuinely believing lies they tell under oath, because lies have become more psychologically necessary than uncomfortable truths. Margaret Barclay faced this same death of truth in Scotland. Her confession was extracted through torture, but once given, it became more real than reality. Her recantation was dismissed as demonic deception. Her protestations of innocence were taken as proof of her guilt. Truth became whatever the authorities needed it to be to justify what they had already decided to do. The flavor is overwhelming now. The taste of watching the foundations of civilization crumble, of seeing human beings voluntarily abandon the tools of reason and logic that separate them from animals. You're witnessing the intellectual equivalent of mass suicide, an entire community choosing comfortable lies over uncomfortable truths. And you're beginning to understand that this is the real horror of Salem. Not that innocent people died, but that truth itself was crucified on the altar of collective certainty. The trials ended not because justice prevailed, but because accusations finally reached people with sufficient power to protect themselves. When ministers' wives and government officials faced charges, suddenly evidence standards became more stringent. The final reckoning. The trials are ending, but not because justice has been served or truth has prevailed. They're ending because the machine of destruction has finally consumed enough of the community to satisfy its appetite, at least for now. The taste in your mouth has become familiar, the metallic flavor of a society that has eaten its own soul. You've survived the Salem Witch Trials, but what have you become? You've watched neighbors murder neighbors while singing hymns. You've seen children's lies transform into legal verdicts. You've witnessed truth being tortured to death while lies were crowned as divine revelation. And you've learned that the most terrifying thing about evil is how easily it can disguise itself as good. The air still tastes of iron and ash, but now there's something else mixed in. The acrid smell of shame, guilt, and the gradual realization that an entire community has committed mass murder and called it holy work. Salem is waking up from its collective nightmare, and the awakening is almost as terrible as the dream. Some of the judges will issue apologies. Some of the accusers will recant their testimony. Some of the community will acknowledge that mistakes were made, but 20 people are still dead, and their deaths can never be undone, their suffering never redeemed, their terror never erased from the historical record. Margaret Barclay never got an apology. She died under torture in Scotland, one of thousands of women murdered by communities convinced they were serving God. Her story is Salem's story, repeated across centuries and continents wherever human beings decide that their fears justify their neighbors' deaths. The taste lingers because it's the flavor of human nature revealed, not the noble savage that romantics imagine, but something far more complex and terrifying. We are capable of infinite cruelty when we convince ourselves that cruelty serves a higher purpose. We can commit any atrocity when we believe we're the heroes of our own story. Salem teaches us that civilization is not our natural state. It's a fragile construction that requires constant maintenance and vigilance. Remove the guardrails of law, reason, and tolerance, and we revert to something primitive and savage with terrifying speed. My question for you, and I really need your thoughts in comments, do you think you would have maintained your integrity in Salem? Not just survived physically, but preserved your moral compass when moral authority was being systematically corrupted? Think carefully, because understanding what would doom you historically might help you recognize when communities transform into killing machines in your own time. So here's my question. Do you think you would have survived Salem? Not physically, that was mostly a matter of luck, but morally, spiritually, intellectually. Could you have maintained your sanity in a community gone mad? Could you have spoken truth when truth was a capital offense? Could you have preserved your humanity when humanity itself was under attack? Margaret Barclay thought she was safe until the day she wasn't. Bridget Bishop thought her success would protect her until it became the reason for her death. Rebecca Nurse thought her reputation for goodness was unassailable until goodness itself became evidence of hidden evil. And you? You thought you were civilized until you tasted the iron and ash of Salem and realized that civilization is just a thin veneer over something much darker and more primitive. Comment survived if you think you would have made it through Salem's madness, accused if you're honest about what would have happened. Let's see how many people really understand what survival meant when conscience became evidence of guilt. Don't forget to subscribe for more journeys into history's darkest lessons. Next week, why you'd be dead in 24 hours, medieval Europe survival reality. And trust me, after researching that topic, Salem will seem merciful. Hit that notification bell, share this with someone brave enough to handle reality, and remember, Salem wasn't the distant past. It was yesterday and could be tomorrow if we forget our neighbors are human beings rather than problems to be solved through elimination. The witch trials ended in Salem, but the capacity for witch trials lives in every human community, waiting for the right combination of fear, envy, and moral certainty to awaken it from its slumber. The witch trials ended in 1693, but the taste of iron and ash never completely fades, because it's the taste of recognizing what we're capable of when fear becomes more important than truth, when belonging requires complicity in murder, when moral certainty justifies any atrocity. Remember, the past wasn't the good old days. It was just the days when survival meant choosing between your conscience and your life, and most people chose their life. Thanks for watching. And remember, in Salem, you wouldn't have survived the first accusation, but now you understand why conscience can be more dangerous than any imaginary devil.